What's up, everybody? Do not adjust your dials. You are in the right place. This is the Mark Rogers Voice of College Football West Virginia channel. Mark's unable to be with us tonight, but this is Couz. I run a channel called Couz's Corner over on YouTube. Please check me out. I'm a West Virginia fan, but I do stuff on all of college football, any major national stories, a lot of Big 12 stuff. Going to be joined shortly by Mr. Travis Knobbe from Last Word on College Football, here for this West Virginia channel live stream. I appreciate everybody joining us. What's up, Travis?
Couz, how are you, man?
Good. Glad you could jump on with us.
Well, it's just us today, right?
Just us. Golden Blue Dude and Mark are both unavailable, so here we are.
We don't have the moderator or the loud one, man. We're gonna have to turn it up a notch.
That's right. Golden Blue Dude's not feeling well today, so let's hope he gets to feeling better.
Yeah, I got a little bit of the crud earlier this week. It was some sore throat and nausea.
Uh-oh. Hope you're feeling better.
Yeah, all good today.
Just for everybody to know, the bottom of the screen is my Twitter handle along with Travis's, if you guys want to look us up on Twitter. And I'm going to put, this is where you can find me, Couz's Corner. And then you can find Travis over at Last Word on College Football. Tonight, I think we're going to break down. Oh, go ahead, Travis.
I'm just laughing. Golden Blue Dude said he's the loud one. He's absolutely right. He needs his voice to be loud, and apparently he doesn't have it today.
That's right. No worries. Hope he gets to feeling better. I won't be available next week, so hopefully he can be extra loud next week to make up for my absence. I think the first thing on the docket tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about this transfer portal stuff, if you don't mind. We'll hit that, and then we'll go into our O-line breakdown. What are your thoughts, Travis, on the loss of – obviously we lost a tight end, Mr. Charles Finley, but I think the big story was the loss of starting cornerback, defensive back, Daryl Porter.
Yeah, I mean, that one, more than – at least as much as Winston Wright, that one hurts. Those are probably the two this year that I'm really concerned about, just because Winston Wright, his speed is hard to replace. Daryl Porter is he's a legacy recruit, so it was really surprising to see him leave. But I also hear rumors from some pretty good sources that there's maybe some tampering with Daryl Porter, which bothers me quite a bit if that's true. If he ends up where I think he's going to end up, it would almost certainly substantiate those rumors. I don't agree with people that Daryl Porter leaving means that there's some huge, massive problem with the program. I think this is just the new reality of college football, that schools like West Virginia are going to unearth some diamonds in the rough, and those diamonds in the rough are going to get some opportunities, some maybe backdoor opportunities, but opportunities to go to places that are in bigger markets that probably have a little more NIL money to throw around, and they're gonna end up going there. So that's just kind of how it's working right now until some things can be done. And I've got some ideas there, but I'll shoot it back to you for now.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm with you. People are. We don't need to panic. I heard it said by Brad Howe, one of the local West Virginia media guys. West Virginia was actually 3 over their scholarship limit anyway. So we were going to have to lose at least 3 people. Now, we didn't want it to be a starting defensive back at a position we're already thin at, but we did have to make room for 3 bodies. So I guess this takes care of that, right? I mean, I can't help but wonder if some of these moves, and we'll never know, but some of these moves often I think are mutual. If you want my honest opinion, not necessarily this one, but just in general, because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes with a kid's grade. You don't know what's going on with a kid's attitude. You don't know in his personal life. There are a lot of things that could dictate for a team to decide, hey, it's best if this kid moves on so we can bring in somebody else. I don't think that happened here because I think Daryl Porter was too important of a piece. But I do think that happens occasionally.
Yeah, and good point. And I want to emphasize what you said, that with what I'm about to say, I don't see any reason to believe that Daryl Porter falls into that category of he was asked to leave. But an example of that is, several years. Well, was it last year? Maybe the year before, we lost promising freshman 4-star David Okoli.
Mm-hmm.
And word on the street was Okoli had found himself into maybe some trouble. And then about 6 months later, criminal charges were pressed on an assault or some kind of criminal case that, it's public record. So I'm not, bad mouthing the kid, but he found himself in trouble, and the team no doubt asked him to leave, and he put his name into the transfer portal because if you don't, you can't go to another school. I mean, that's the thing. Like now, kids used to get kicked out of school and it was behind the scenes, and they'd sort of transfer a year and a half later, and maybe they'd make it, maybe they wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Now a kid gets put in the portal and they're counted against you, regardless of the rationale or reason.
Right.
But yeah, so there are some of those. Another one that entered this week may fall into that same category. Maybe not necessarily because of trouble, just because he wasn't cutting it. And that's Tavis Lee, one of our defensive linemen.
Yeah, I forgot about him.
In fact, he wasn't even on. I look at 3 different scholarship distribution charts before I do, any of my spreadsheets or analysis of what's going on in a position room, just double check myself and make sure I've got the roster right. And Tavis Lee wasn't even on the scholarship distribution count towards the end of the season. And he was a class of 2018. So he was Dana Holgerson's last full class. Redshirted, his first year, and then redshirted the COVID year. But he'd only played, a dozen or so snaps in the 3 years he was in Morgantown. So
right.
That's one of those, an example of one of those that was probably asked to, head on out. You're not going to make it here. And that's the type of thing that the portal is really good for. I mean, some kids, they look like promising prospects out of high school and they just don't cut it, but they still love the game of football. Why not let them have the ability to do that? So yeah, that's good thought, Couz, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Not a problem. Real quick, Joey asked if we could see both chats. Yes, I can. Both chats show up on the screen at the same time, even though I'm simulcasting on 2 different channels. For those of you who haven't yet, if you're over here on the college football, Voice of College Football main channel, please either now or after the show, go on over to the West Virginia channel and please subscribe to that for us. We're trying to get the Flying WV a little more respect nationally and teach the world a little bit more about West Virginia football. What's up, Gamecock Chuck? And then Joey was talking about a 4-star defensive back out of Florida, but he couldn't remember his name.
Yeah, that's Jacoby Spells.
That's it. Yep. So Joey, you are correct. He's out of Florida, right?
Right, yeah, South Florida. There are actually a couple of guys, you talk about, and that sort of gets ahead of us a little bit, but you talk about, yes, Daryl Porter is a loss. Is it a replaceable amount of production? Absolutely. I mean, I look at the I've got on my screen here the roster and snap count spreadsheet that I have, and you've got Nick Troy Fortune, who's the most experienced cornerback in the room. You've got Charles Woods, who's split time between cornerback and safety. He could slide back over to cornerback if we needed him to. But we also brought in Marcus Floyd, who is a pretty athletic FCS transfer from Murray State. Similar to Charles Woods, he was an FCS transfer, sort of overlooked in his high school recruiting days and played, lights out at the FCS level, and we brought him up. And we've also got Andrew Wilson Lamp, who's now going into his redshirt freshman season. And then we've got three, newcomers in Jacoby Spells, Mumu Bin Wahad, and Tyron Woodby. Mumu Bin Wahad is, in my view, just looking at the film, I know Spells was rated a little higher, but Bin Wahad looked every bit as good on tape and played, the highest division football in Georgia. And I've talked personally to some Georgia coaches down here in 7A who think that Mumu Bin Wahad was the best cover corner in the state of Georgia. And that's saying a lot because, obviously Travis Hunter came out of that same 7A division. So
Right.
not best all around. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying Mumu Bin Wahad is better than Travis Hunter, and they got it that wrong. Just saying as far as cover corner. And frankly, that's one of the areas that Daryl Porter struggled in last year. He was a decent ball hawk, good solid tackler, good athlete. Coverage left a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, and I also wonder too, and this is just my theory. I don't know anything that this is true. It's just totally me and my opinion, but or just an idea that I know that West Virginia has been more thin at safety than they have at corner. And I had heard, I think Coach Brown mentioned that they would probably take some of those corners and move them to safety. And I can't help but wonder if when Neil Brown sat down with, or the position coach sat down with Daryl Porter and said maybe they were going to move him to safety and he didn't want to move to safety. Who knows? There's so many different reasons these guys can want to leave. I really hope it's not tampering. I know Coach Brown suspected some tampering a couple of years ago when a couple of other guys left. And if this guy ends up at the school I think he's going to go to, it'll almost prove that it's happened twice. Because this coach is now at another school, and we would have had two defensive backs go to schools he's coaching at. So I don't know. But how do you prove it, though, right? I mean.
Yeah. There are ways, but right now, and this is something we can talk about throughout the show, but I've got some ideas on how the transfer portal should be maybe refined in the coming years, and that's right now the NCAA doesn't really care too much about portal tampering with kids before they enter. The NCAA as an enforcement mechanism is kind of neutered anyway. But they could definitely do some things to make this better.
Right.
But yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. That Daryl Porter may have been asked to play safety. Frankly, you think about his skill set, he may have actually been a little better at free safety than he was at corner, just because he's got the range and athleticism and speed. Wasn't good on an island, but was good enough to ball hawk and make things a little more difficult for the quarterback. So that's and Joey, I see Joey's comment. I'm actually thinking of a different school than you.
Okay.
Same state, different school.
I know who you're talking about then, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, and I shouldn't have said that, what I said, I guess, but when Neil Brown brought that up a couple years ago, that was the first one that came to my mind, and he may not have been referring to that school that I'm thinking about, He may have been referring to another one, but he said he was pretty confident it happened. He just couldn't prove it. So, but I'm sure it happens everywhere. I'm sure it happens a lot at universities across the country. Really quick, 304 podcast. What's up, 304 podcast? You all may know them. They used to be known as the Mountaineer Effect, but he says if you really break down all of the WVU players that have left in 2021 and 2022, 75%, maybe a little more, were all Holgorsen recruits.
Yeah, the number I have, and I broke this down. I keep a transfer portal spreadsheet as well, both national and for WVU. And the numbers I have, if you consider who was the coach when they first signed with the school, Dana Holgorsen recruits account for 61% of our transfers.
Okay, I knew it was up there. I didn't know the exact number. And that's one of the things I brought out in a video I dropped recently about people panicking. People trying to throw Neil Brown under the bus, say there's problems with the program. But what people need to understand is, and matter of fact, Darius Steele said this same thing in the interview he did with Skylar Callahan, is when Neil Brown came in, he turned that program in a complete 180 in culture, complete culture shock to some of these guys, man. Dana Holgorsen, he said Dana Holgorsen was completely 100% about football. That's all he talked about. That was his focus. Neil Brown is more of a family type person. He does a lot of family activities and things with them. So some of the guys and the guys who were recruited by Dana wanted to play for Dana. They liked the way he ran the program, good or bad. That was just what they wanted. So when Neil came in and done it completely different, of course you're going to have guys that don't like it. I mean, that's human nature. We don't like change. We're not comfortable with change, especially if it's a drastic change. So to me, that's all this is you've got guys who don't like the culture that he's building. It's just not a fit for them. It doesn't mean it's good, bad, indifferent. It's just not a fit. And then you've got a lot of guys who are leaving to go play at smaller schools where they get more playing time. I think that's the majority of them. And then the guys who are going to other Power 5 schools, could be moving closer to home. I mean, there's various reasons they could be leaving. But at the end of the day, I think we want guys that want to be here. I mean, that's how I look at it.
One thing Darius said in that interview that you're referencing, he said that he never was in Dana Holgorsen's office.
That was shocking. I could not believe that.
And it matches something I've heard from a couple of former players during the Dana era who were not huge contributors. And then if you remember Josh Lambert, like the second game in a row when he hit the game-winning field goal under Dana. Josh Lambert made the joke in the post-game interview that he didn't even realize that Coach Holgorsen knew his name. And people have talked to him about this afterwards. And Lambert was like, I was not kidding. I did not know that Holgorsen knew my name.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why you wouldn't appreciate more a family culture where the coach does know your name and sort of takes that time out and doesn't play the favorites the way that Holgorsen seems to have done based on the bits and pieces of the locker room that we've heard from players.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are some people who obviously didn't like the shift. I mean, I also hear that Brown is far more of a disciplinarian.
Right.
And some kids don't like that for one reason or another.
Right. And that's he's I think he's more of an old school type coach. More like the Don Nealons of the world. I mean, he's that type of coach. And, some players may not like it. And that it is what it is. And if they don't want to be here, if their heart ain't in it, their head ain't in it, then we probably don't need them here. And that's not anything. It's not an attack to the players. It's just you're not going to get you're not going to get them performing at the top of their game if they're not happy. I mean, that's just the way it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's right. So at the end of the day, that's one of the good things about the portal is that it lets kids who are in bad situations move on to another situation that might or might not be better. My sort of analysis on it has been generally that you just look at the overall trends and nationwide it's less than, it's right around 30% of kids that are from the Power 5 Plus programs, which is the Power 5 Plus Notre Dame and BYU, end up transferring to another Power 5 Plus institution. And even fewer of those make meaningful contributions at the new schools.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, grass isn't always greener, but for some kids who are in bad culture fits and didn't realize it, you don't really know how something's going to work until you're there. Kids that are in bad culture fits, the grass might be greener for them.
Right.
And I think, fans attack the kids very often directly. You see this on Twitter. You saw it on Twitter in the last couple of days. And that's just, you don't know what a kid's going through. You just don't know. Before the transfer portal opened up as much as it had, how many players did we hear stories from that they requested from the NCAA a waiver to play automatically because the reason they were transferring schools is, mom or dad was sick or grandma was sick and dying and they wanted to be closer to family. And
right.
A lot of legitimate stories like that.
Right.
My main issue with the portal is two of them is tampering and timing. I think there need to be some parameters on it that make a little more sense and give it some more predictability in terms of how coaches can rebuild rosters after losing players to the portal.
Right. All right. Real quick, if anybody's on here from Boise College Football main channel, you're not in the wrong place. This is the West Virginia live show from the West Virginia channel on the Voice of College Football. Mark couldn't be with us tonight. So Travis Knobbe from Last Word on College Sports and myself, Couz from Couz's Corner, are holding the fort down. Golden Blue Dude was also unable to be with us tonight. He's under the weather, so we wish him a quick recovery. Now let's go to our position breakdown of this week, and that's the offensive line. Travis, I'll let you start.
All right. Well, I'm happy to do so. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit to start with, and that's that. The offensive line has been the most maligned position under Neil Brown's tenure in Morgantown.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big reasons why that's been the case is that, speaking of transfers, when Neil Brown first got here, we lost Matt Jones, who was a starting center. We lost Josh Sills very early in the season, who was a starter, ended up going to start for Oklahoma State. And we lost a couple other linemen to graduation, and we were returning a total of about 600 to 900 snaps, excluding Josh Sills, who played for 2 games and then decided Neil Brown wasn't the right coach for him. And then after that, we were young. Most of the snap counts that returned graduated after the first year. And so it's kind of behind the 8 ball. You want sort of the cascade to be a couple of seniors, a couple of juniors, and maybe a rising star sophomore is how you'd love it to be. Mm-hmm. And sort of fill in as needed, give younger players depth snaps later in the games that you're either winning or being blown out. We have not had that luxury, but next year is the first year that we really have that luxury, and the first year that we can really say, look, if this offensive line is not performing still, it really is a problem with how they are being coached or what kind of talent it is that they've actually got in. And the reason I say that is that next year we've got, the starting 5 presumptively are James Gamitter, who has 1,662 snaps, Brandon Yates, who has 1,436 snaps, Doug Nestor, who has over 1,750 snaps. I don't know his exact number because Virginia Tech does not keep as good a snap count chart as some other schools. Zach Frazier has 1,389 snaps, and Wyatt Milam has 561. And you've got a good mix there. Gamitter is technically a redshirt junior because of the free COVID year, but he's going into his fourth year in the program. Brandon Yates is going into his third. Doug Nestor will be going into his fifth year in D1 college football. Frazier his fourth, and Milam his second. So you've got a really good breakdown in terms of experience. And they should be able to do something with that. The weakest spot, we all know, is very clearly left tackle. Brandon Yates has been the one that has performed the worst, and the sort of grading has borne that out. I'll be interested to see what happens at that position, whether they try to get a transfer that's got some experience to compete with Brandon Yates, maybe sharpen him up a little bit, or whether they look at their depth. Even though Jordan White looks more like a guard, maybe they could slide him into left tackle. He's actually played pretty good in the 180 or so snaps that he's had his career so far.
Yeah. And we brought 4 freshmen in this 2022 class. Of course, they probably won't play right away, obviously, unless they have to, which we don't want them to have to. Because, like you said, that's a position you need a lot of snaps at, really, if you want to be productive. But I think the future looks good at that position. I like the guys they brought in, and then we did lose Parker Moore to the portal, but I'm sure he was probably not happy that he lost his starting job to a true freshman. But the true freshman beat him for the job, so I mean, it is what it is. I hated to see him go because he did have some experience, and we needed the depth, but at the end of the day, he'd had to do what was best for him. And but he's the only offensive lineman we've lost to the portal that I know of. Is that at least recently? Is that correct?
This year, I believe that is correct.
This year, yeah, I meant this year. I apologize. Yeah, this season.
It's the only one that's coming to mind right now, and I'm just double checking my list to see. And yeah, you are absolutely right about that. No other offensive lineman gone. I have, one of the things I was thinking before this week and the additional bodies that we lost, I knew we were behind, or we had too many. If we take the full bevy of transfers and fill in our scholarship count that we have available, we would have been 3 over the limit. And I was sort of thinking that, 1 or 2 of the sort of redshirt freshman or sophomore offensive linemen might leave, because there are some guys who just have not had much burn despite some experience in the program. I hope I'm wrong about this, but one guy that sort of jumps off the list to me is Chris Mayo, 4-star out of New Jersey, that he's had 7 snaps in 2 years. Technically just a redshirt freshman still, because he redshirted his first year, and he got the free COVID year. Well, actually, reverse that. First year was free COVID year, and then last year he redshirted again. So he's got time to grow, but some of these guys are. I just feel like we'd probably lose 1 or 2 more offensive linemen after spring, after sort of that shakes out.
Right.
But we've got a lot of bodies there. The room is 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 deep. So that's, you've got pretty much almost a full 3 deep in the offensive line room. That's a lot of scholarships in that room.
Right. Absolutely. And real quick, guys, for those of you who may have just hopped on, This is the Mark Rogers West Virginia channel. We're also simulcasting on the Voice of College Football main channel. This is our Friday night West Virginia live stream. I'm Couz with Couz's Corner, joined by Travis Knobbe with Last Word on College Sports, College Football, or Last Word on Sports, College Football. I apologize for that. If you want to check me out on YouTube, obviously Couz's Corner, but I'm not just a West Virginia. Even though I'm a West Virginia fan, I don't do just West Virginia videos. I do stuff on national stuff, national stories as well. Do a lot of Big 12 stuff. But so check us out, please. And also like the West Virginia channel, please. We need more subscribe to the West Virginia channel. Also hit the like button on this video, on this live stream. That'll help promote us. And then we wish Mark, don't know. Hopefully Mark's feeling okay. I know Golden Blue Dude couldn't join us tonight because he's feeling under the weather. So we wish him a quick recovery. But back to the topic at hand. The one thing that obviously everybody knows, the West Virginia O-line was a little inconsistent this year, struggled at times to protect Daggy. And, as immobile as he was, it caused a lot of problems. But one thing I don't know if a lot of people remember, because Coach Brown, I don't even know if Coach Brown ever mentioned it, but I saw it a couple of times on some Twitter feeds and some other things. But Doug Nestor played a portion of the season with an injured hand. He actually had a cast on his hand for probably half the games this year.
Yeah, the running joke was he was playing with a club,
right? So there was a picture of all the O linemen together at one of the guys' houses. I guess it may have been Coach Brown's house. I'm not sure, but they were all getting together for dinner, and you could see Doug Nestor in the background with a cast, and that was the first time I'd ever knew anything about it. But it didn't get talked about much. I guess they didn't want to make excuses or whatever. But it seemed like, to me, once I knew about that, I kind of started watching a little bit and paying more attention. When he got that cast off his hand, he started playing a lot better. So I think it made a difference. Really, at the middle of our O-line was really solid, honestly. Him, Frazier, and Gamitter played pretty well, I thought. Most of the time, the weak spots were at the tackle positions. Wyatt Milam improved every single game. He was a true freshman. Brandon Yates had some struggles, but there again, he's a young guy, so he'll get better. But so I really think I'm optimistic that the offensive line this year may go from one of our biggest weaknesses to one of our biggest strengths this season. That's what I'm banking on. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I think you could be right for even more than just that reason. I think one of the things that Golden Blue Dude talked about when I was on his show was that it's sort of a combination of things. It's you've got experience coming back, you've got snap counts, adding to that, and then you have a offensive coordinator coming in Graham Harrell, who is really good at scheming around offensive weaknesses. So if he does see a weakness on that offensive line, he's going to find ways to zone block around it. That's sort of what he's done in the past. No reason to believe it wouldn't continue. And then potentially, I still have not given up on Will Crowder being potentially the starting quarterback to begin the year. Or Garrett Green, for that matter, even though I think may not be as good of a fit in this offense. But if Nico ends up being the starter, his left-handedness might mask the biggest weakness on that offensive line, which is that left tackle position. Wyatt Milam quietly was the 5th best rated player on the offense last year, despite being graded very poorly in games 1 through 5. 6 is sort of when he started picking it up and gaining steam. And so if that's that's your blind spot tackle, if Nico's the starter, and if he's one of your best offensive linemen, you've got a much better recipe for avoiding the sacks than we've dealt with the past 3 seasons. The top 2 graded offensive players probably not surprisingly, Zach Frazier was number one. And Doug Nestor, despite the first 5-6 games playing with the club, was number two. So there's there are still a couple of weaknesses on that line, but I think that with the experience that they have coming back in an off season to think about it, I really think I see this offensive line being more motivated than it's been. So I agree. I think what was once a weakness is going to end up being one of our biggest assets. It's certainly the place where the most experience returns on the offensive line, or on the offense, rather.
Yeah. And with Graham Harrell in, I mean, Graham Harrell's biggest focus, one of his biggest focuses is on getting rid of the football. So, I mean, he doesn't want his quarterback holding on the ball more than a couple seconds, which will help, so if there is any weaknesses, that'll hopefully help mask it. And depending on who we have back there, quarterback obviously will help as well if we have somebody that can move around a little bit and avoid the pass rush if, that does get there. A couple questions. You got anything else on the O-line, Travis, before I start looking at some of these questions and comments?
No, I think let's dig into the comments, man.
Okay. We've got Mr. HD. I think it's more of a comment, but he says, what happened with Porter? My Canes are looking at him now because of a die. Yeah, that was my initial thought when I heard that he went to the portal, that he wanted to go play for Jamal because that's who recruited him. But also you think, why wouldn't he have transferred a year ago to Georgia? If that's all he wanted, if that's all it was based on. But maybe he wants to go back to Florida. He's a Florida guy, so I don't know.
Yeah, his true freshman season, Daryl Porter didn't play a whole lot, so I don't. Even if a die was pushing really hard to bring Porter into Georgia last year, I don't think Porter would have been a take. Georgia wouldn't have wasted a scholarship on that.
That makes sense.
Porter really came along, last year. He just showed he was a diamond in the rough. He was probably underrated as a recruit, and he has his weaknesses. No player is perfect, but he had some strengths. I've heard. I mean, and obviously you've mentioned it sort of subtly, Couz, but I've heard two possible destinations for Porter. One being Florida State, and the other being Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, maybe Miami is also kind of like, well, look, if we could yank one of their starting cornerbacks from them, that would be good retribution for them picking Jacoby Spells right out of our backyard. That might be, because Miami was mad about that. I remember one of their assistant coaches that tried to get into a Twitter war with West Virginia and said that coaches on our staff were telling false things to Spells, and that Miami really wanted him. That's not actually what made Spell's decision. I think I've referenced on a previous show that one of my fellow writers, no longer with us, has moved on to Rivals, I believe, but knows the family really well. And he said the family actually encouraged him to leave Florida and go play college football, not relying on his home and that network.
Right. Yeah. You did reference that. I don't think you told us who the player was at the time, but you did reference that story.
Yep.
We've got somebody had asked about our thoughts on the CFP not expanding. I just actually dropped a video on that today if y'all want to check it out, but on my channel. But I mean, I'm disappointed, but not surprised. I mean, I think we all knew this was coming, and I kind of understand it. There are so many moving parts in college football right now, so much chaos with the transfer portal, NIL. If you throw another wrench into this thing, man, it could get, plus conference expansion. You got a lot of these conferences, TV contracts are coming up in the next year or two. It'd be a lot to deal with for these commissioners and these ADs and these presidents in a very, very tight window of time. So I actually I don't like it as a fan, but looking at it from a business and a logic perspective, I kind of understand it, to be honest. What do you think, Travis?
I kind of take the opposite viewpoint.
Okay.
I think from a business perspective, I think that several people were pushing hard for it, including the networks, because it would make more money. But I think and maybe it's just that college football is going to look different forever for the rest of our lives, and will continue to evolve in ways that we may or may not like. Kids who are just starting to watch the game, 15 to 25, maybe early 30s, that don't quite remember it the same way that we do. We're getting into sort of our middle-aged period. They may not care as much, but me as a 40-year-old college football fan, I remember when bowls meant something. I remember when every regular season game meant something. And if you put us into a 12-team college football playoff, how much does that water down the season? How are you going to select the teams? Is it going to be, all 5 Power 5 conference champions? And, what are you going to give? Like 2 G5 schools, and then the rest are, the next 5 ranked, the next 5 ranked Power 5 teams. What's that? That's going to look like the SEC regular season games would not matter at all at that point, as long as you win 10 games during the season. And with the week out of conference schedule that's played by the SEC, this is 4 gimmies right there, unless you're, one of the rare schools that loses to a G5 or FCS. But I think it waters down the regular season, and I think it places even less importance on the bowl. Bowls would not matter at that point.
Right.
They don't matter a great deal now because of the 4-team football playoff. And what have we seen in every college football playoff? I mean, the semifinal matchups have really not been good competitive football games by and large. I mean, there are a few exceptions to the rule, but that there are only exceptions means that the rule is pretty well established, that there's not, year in and year out, there's not 4 teams that are actually worthy of playing in the college football championship. There are only 2, and those 2 have pretty much always dominated their semifinal opponents. So I don't really like it. I think it's going to water it down. But from a business perspective, for people wanting to make money off of this game, it definitely adds, it would add money to the pot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it would. I'm sorry. When I said business perspective, I wasn't referring necessarily to the money side of it, but just the whole, all the moving parts and stuff that's going on right now, that it's just so much for them to wrap their head around. You know what I'm saying? And get control. I think they're worried about it. Maybe they're worried about it getting out of control and not being able to, regulate everything and keep. And I'll be honest, I can't help but wonder if maybe there's some ego involved as well with some of these conferences, because it seems like they were dead set on expanding until the SEC took Texas and Oklahoma, and then all of a sudden it became, we don't want to do it anymore. So I can't help but wonder too if there's some jockeying for position between the alliance conferences, which turns out that's going to be a farce, and the SEC. But I don't know, man. They sent us mixed signals, which is what frustrates me, like it was going to be a done deal. And then all of a sudden it's not. So, but let's move on to something else. We've got somebody asked up here, I think it was Roger Dodger, says, is WVU still pursuing quarterback JT Daniels in the transfer portal? I don't know if we ever were pursuing him. I did a video saying they should pursue him because he's familiar with Graham Harrell and his offense. He actually played under Graham Harrell for a preseason and a half until he got injured. So he's he'd be able to pick the offense up, and he wouldn't, he'd probably only come in and play 1 year. So it might not necessarily cause us to lose Nico. But I don't know what your response to that, Travis.
Yeah, JT Daniels certainly, unless it was kept super secret, JT Daniels has not visited Morgantown. Whether they've had conversations with him, they've not. Nobody on the coaching staff has released that information, and there haven't really even been substantial rumors to that effect. That being said, I really haven't heard too much about JT Daniels visiting anywhere yet. Have you?
I have not. It's been kept really quiet if he has. I think they're taking it really slowly. They're probably going to. I think I did read somewhere. I think that he's finishing out his semester at Georgia, so maybe he's just focusing on his classwork, trying to get that done, and then he'll make a decision in the spring. That's kind of what I'm thinking he's probably doing. And I just is just a total guess, but my anticipation is or expectation is that he'll probably go to school out west somewhere closer to where he lives. And another wrinkle now is we've got Jaden Daniels in the transfer portal out of Arizona State.
Yes.
Another experienced quarterback. So
did you see the video that the players shared last night on Twitter?
I did. So it's safe to say he's not going back to Arizona State.
Yeah, he's not. No, he's not. He's not going.
They were glad to see. Either they were mad at him for leaving or glad to see him go. I couldn't really figure out which it was, but
I had heard some things that came out right around the same time. That now, granted, was there ever really a chance that Caleb Williams was going to go to Arizona State? Probably not. Maybe that's a pie in the sky dream, but. What I understood was the head coach and Daniels sat down and talked, and Daniels convinced the head coach not to pursue Caleb Williams that hard. And if there's any truth to that at all, that would explain why the players were so angry because they had an opportunity. Maybe I think it was a pipe dream the whole time, but they maybe had an opportunity to land one of the prize transfer recruits in the country, and Daniel said, "No, don't go after him. Otherwise, I'm not coming back, and I'll be really mad." And then he leaves anyway.
Yeah, that was a little strange. That whole ordeal has been strange. Of course, they did get rid of their offensive coordinator since that meeting took place, so that might have played a role in his decision. But I mean, that was weeks ago, so I'm not sure what would have taken him so long. So the whole thing's strange, but he'll land on his feet somewhere. He's a good quarterback, has shown he's got the ability. It wouldn't surprise me to see him as well stay, because he's a West Coast kid as well. I was looking through I was just kind of curious to see who recruited him out of high school, and I was doing some research. USC did go after him, but it was before Graham Harrell was there. Graham Harrell didn't go to USC until January of 19, and Jaden Daniels was recruited and signed December of 18. So they wouldn't. I don't think Graham Harrell would have been involved at all in recruiting because I was thinking, do they try to? Is there a relationship there between those guys? But I don't think there is.
Well, did North Texas offer him?
I didn't see them on the list. It was pretty much all Power 5 schools for the most part.
Yeah.
Now I'm not saying for sure they didn't, but the list I looked at, they weren't on it.
But JT Daniels, to sort of finish that loop,
right?
He's one of those kids that he's a known enough quantity that finishing out the semester is probably the right move for him, because after spring camp, that's when schools are really going to know whether they need to hit the panic button
right.
or not. And he's going to get his better market probably in May and June rather than right now anyway.
Right. Yep, I agree with you. Let's see what else we got here. Georgia's poking fun of our state's name. No South Virginia. Where's East Virginia, North Virginia? I don't really see a whole lot up there now. Do you have is there any other thing you want to touch on before we sign off?
Yeah, maybe to get to the sort of broader picture, and I'm writing an article about this now that's just basically simply called Reimagining the Transfer Portal, and sort of thinking about how it might, if we did it the right way, how it might look. And you think about NFL free agency, right? And there's a fixed start date for free agency, and then but for certain types of free agent, I mean, most of the free agency is done, except for filling in positions on rosters by the beginning of the season. But players aren't released from their contracts until X date. Players aren't allowed to start talking to teams, and teams aren't allowed to start talking to players until a certain date. And the NFL enforces that. If you go after and start talking to a player prior to the beginning of free agency, when the NFL has found out about it, they have fined teams and had teams lose draft picks for just that type of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a trade deadline. There's a fixed and definitive point after which teams can no longer trade, and unless you're talking about sort of free agency and waivers and that whole process. But there's a specified draft period, and it all kind of works in tandem to the point where coaches kind of know what's going to be on their roster when they go into sort of the final run up to the season. The thing that bothers me most about the transfer portal is that there's no fixed window. So a school, they go through their high school recruiting, and there are open periods and there are dead periods, and then there are sort of combination periods where you can make calls but not other types of contact. And there is a calendar that exists, and it exists for a reason. And then there is a signing window during which high school players can sign during the early period, and then a signing window when they can sign during the late period. And if they have not signed by the conclusion of the late period, they cannot play at any institution governed by the NCAA that next season. And those fixed limits have worked well. But with the transfer portal, you could have a situation where maybe I'm a little short on D-line and cornerback, but I've got one or two more cornerbacks, and I've got a little more veteran experience at D-line. So I prioritize one position over the other. I prioritize cornerback. And then all of a sudden I get done with the recruiting period, and I get done with spring camp, and I go into summer, and I lose a couple of D linemen to the transfer portal for one reason or another. I don't have enough time to fix that new deficiency on my roster. And I think that's really what bothers me the most about the transfer portal, is not that kids have freedom. I actually support it for that reason. I support the freedom that the kids have. I think some of them use it unwisely and for the wrong reasons, but that's the same thing adults do. Adults do the same thing. They do things unwisely and for the wrong reasons.
They do. Absolutely, they do.
So, fixing, I just worry about it from a timing standpoint. You lose these players at random times. Guys entering the portal in the middle of February does not make a lick of sense to me, because they can't enroll in the school in their new school until the summer anyway. Then they can't practice with the new school during spring at this point. All schools have cut off their deadlines for enrollment.
Right.
So I'd like to see a transfer portal that, one, has time deadlines, and that, two, if the NCAA does find out that schools and coaches and their agents and people acting on their behalf have actually tampered with players, encouraging them to enter the portal before the player has actually done so of his own volition, I think those schools should be, stripped of scholarships. I think the NCAA should take a hard line on that.
I agree with you. There's got to be some parameters. And I saw, I'm going to address this comment here. Solid Human, who has the wrong name after reading the comment, says, who watches West Virginia football? And why would you two recommend this BS to me? I'm already a fan of a top college. Don't know who that would be. Definitely can't be Pitt. You use the word top college. A legendary school wouldn't waste my time on West Virginia. Well, you're here, aren't you? So what are you trying to tell us?
I love those comments. Fly by night. I'm just gonna screw with people comments. They're funny. Yeah. I like those people, man. They've got a really good sense of humor.
It's all good. So I posted it. I thought you'd get a kick out of that one. Nothing wrong with a little trash talk, as long as it's all.
Yeah, except why don't you tell us who the college is if we're going to trash talk?
Exactly. Yeah, he's apparently he's ashamed of it. I don't know.
Right. I'm gonna trash talk in code. That's the new.
And then Joey says, "Who's that? Solid Human? James Madison." Yeah. Everybody, please hit the like button for us real quick. There was a comment up here I wanted to address that I liked about the NIL. Or transfer portal, rather. It says, make the players university employees with a contract. Otherwise, they are free people who can do as they wish. I got two comments there. One, isn't a scholarship kind of a contract? But two, I think that may be coming eventually. And here's why. At some point, college athletes are going to become paid employees, and they're going to be able to unionize. That's already the National Labor Relations Board has already said that players at private universities can unionize in their eyes. So I think it will eventually happen for all universities. When that happens, I think you'll see the unions with the players in it and the universities doing contract negotiations. I'm not saying I'm for that because I think then you're no longer a student athlete. You're just an athlete. But I tell you what, though, the more I think about it, it may actually help solve a lot of these problems because once they sign that dotted line and the union signs that contract, then they're bound to that contract legally. So I actually think we're heading in. It's going to take us a few years to get there, but I think we're heading in that direction. What do you think, Travis?
Yeah, I've I for those of you who don't know this, and most of you on here would have no reason to know yet, because you're new to the channel. But in my day job, I'm an attorney, and so I've been following a lot of this, the NIL stuff, the cases that have been pursued with the NLRB to make players employees. I've been pursuing these closely for not just as a sports fan, but also as a professional. I think we may be trending in that direction based on what the NLRB did, but I don't know necessarily that the attorneys representing the players are telling the players what the consequences of that will be. Because the players over the last, it's the players that have really led the charge towards the things that have given them the new freedoms that they have now.
Right.
If they are employees, they won't have the same level of freedoms. They won't be the school will be able to tell them, you can't use Twitter in this way. You
right.
can't. They'll be able to limit their social media presence. They'll be able to have more, exercise more control and take percentages of their NIL contracts. They'll be able to bind them to longer term contracts than just a year by year sort of deal that we have now. And also, what I find most interesting about those cases is, not college football, but the sort of the Olympic sport athletes.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cost the universities a great deal of money to go through the administrative, legal, and payroll logistics to make this work. They're gonna be spending a lot more money on football, basketball, and baseball in particular than they are right now. And where's that money going to come from? It's going to end up being diverted from essentially, programs that are kept on to fulfill, for some schools, programs that are kept on solely to fulfill Title IX requirements. So if you're a Power 5 volleyball player or a gymnast, your opportunities for legitimate scholarships at universities are going to go down. So it's just interesting to watch it play out. I know that may be more in depth than maybe you wanted to hear, Couz, but
No, it's not. I love it.
Me, that's what I do.
Exactly. I've actually been wanting to hit you up about that anyway. I just haven't yet. So maybe one of these days we can do a show on it or something.
Yeah, we could do a whole. I mean, I could do a whole hour on just that.
yeah, it's great. You were wrong about Joey says you were wrong about NIL keeping players committed to a school, Couz. That falls under pay for play, and they can't do that. Well, that's what. But if they become employees, that's actually what I mean. That's essentially what they would be. It would be pay for play at that point, right? I mean, that's what an employee is.
Yeah, right now, Joey's absolutely right that right now you cannot do that. You cannot give a player an NIL contract and say, because I've given you money, you have to stay at this school for 4
Right.
years. Or,
right.
Really, you're not supposed to tell a player, I'll only give you NIL money if you go to Texas A&M, but we know that happened. Those rules
Right.
were bent. Several schools bent those rules, but it is pay for play, and that's not how it's supposed to work. But you're also right, Couz, that if they become employees, that is essentially exactly what's happening is pay for play.
Yeah.
And then we start worrying about salary caps and
Yep. Then it becomes the minor leagues for the NFL, basically, which it kind of already is. Lewis Papp says I was working on passing laws to make players employees. Yeah, I had heard that. I'll be anxious to see where that goes. Because if they do it, if they're the first state to do it, then I'll look for other states to follow. But Travis brings up a great point that the players might be a be careful what you wish for type situation for these players. Dave, earlier, I think I totally butchered your last name. I called you Smothers, but it looks like it's Snother. I don't know, but I apologize for messing up your last name. Says I'm not a West Virginia fan, but I love college football, and also that hat is fresh. I don't know whose hat you're referring to.
It's got to be yours.
If it is, I appreciate the comment. This is my live streaming hat. Try to wear it on every live stream. I found this hat in a store not long ago, and I was like, man, I've got to have that hat. I loved it. I fell in love with it.
And somebody should make that Mountaineer into an NFT and sell it. Given that's the kind of era that we're in now. Everything's an NFT these days.
Exactly. Speaking of that, did you see the latest partnership, the NIL partnership that is going on at West Virginia? I saw it on Twitter right before we came on. I'll touch on this, and then we'll probably have to jump off because it's been an hour. But Fanatics, West Virginia is partnering with Fanatics, and fans are going to be able to buy West Virginia jerseys with our favorite player's name on the back, and then that player will get paid for that. Which I mean, I think it's great. I'm surprised they hadn't done that already, to be honest. When I heard pay for play, that's kind of or not pay for play, but NIL. That's one of the first things that came to my mind was they can sell their jerseys now, right? Because you've seen player jerseys before, but there was never a name on it, so they couldn't get paid. It would just be a generic jersey with a number, and you always knew fans knew whose number it was, but the player couldn't get paid because their name wasn't on it, which I thought was a little bit. I thought that was a little bit wrong, to be honest.
Well, then they started doing to get around that after the, that decision that killed NCAA football games. Then they started doing if you buy a jersey for the 2016 year, it just said 16 on the back.
Exactly. Yeah, they started doing that. Or you'll find West Virginia with the number, I think it's 67 or 63, or the year that we became a university.
67.
Yeah. So it's, there was ways around it with that. So you're right. But I think it's a great idea. I mean, depending on the cost, I might buy one myself. I don't know.
It'd be better than buying them, the way that they did it before was you buy it from, for $17 from China and you wait 3 months to get it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, geez.
But yeah, I had not heard that yet. I heard rumors that it was coming. I had not seen the official announcement.
Yeah. Bryce Ford Wheaton and a couple other guys retweeted it on their Twitter accounts. So it looks like it's happening. But well, listen, I appreciate everybody tuning in once again. My name is Couz. This is the Mark Rogers Voice of College Football West Virginia channel, simulcasting on his main channel. He couldn't be with us tonight, nor could Golden Blue Dude. But Travis and I were here to hold the fort down. Hopefully we did it justice. You can find Travis over on Last Word on College Sports. I mean, I butcher that every time, Travis. Last Word on College Football. And and then you can find me on YouTube at Couz's Corner. Make sure you put the apostrophe or it won't come up. But I do college football, not just West Virginia, but other topics too. Throw in a little bit of basketball here and there as well. So please come and check my channel out. Subscribe. Check out Travis's work on Last Word on college sports or college football. And he's all over. All you go to is Google Last Word on college football, and you can find Travis's name listed under all the authors and pull up his stuff. It's pretty simple.
There's not a whole lot of Travis Knobbes out there in the world.
Yeah, actually, I've Googled Travis Knobbe's name, and you can just Google Travis Knobbe's name, and you will find his articles. Trust me.
That you'll find an MMA fighter who was apparently 1-0 in his career, and I don't ever remember being in an MMA ring. Maybe I got really drunk one night and did that.
That's funny.
But I probably wouldn't be 1-0. I'd probably be 0-1.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm not a fighter. I tell everybody all the time that's not my cup of tea. I try to avoid fights at all costs. But anyway, listen, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Everybody, please go subscribe to Mark Rogers West Virginia channel. We're trying to get up to that magical 1,000 number. Please help get us there. We need your support. Even if you're not a West Virginia fan, if you just love college football, come join us for every Friday night. We'll do a live stream, and then we try to throw some other stuff on the channel as well when we can. So come join us, subscribe, and heck, even if you, like Mark said the other night, even if you just subscribe and don't ever watch anything, just subscribe, and then once we get over to like 1,100 subscribers, then you can unsubscribe. We'll just do that to help us out. But we appreciate everybody tuning in. Everybody have a good night.
All right. Take care, y'all.